Don't go. That's what she said. 2 words. Standing in the middle of Hartfield's department store at 8:40 on Christmas Eve, tinsel everywhere, a choir of children singing something about angels, and my ex-wife, the woman who had signed the divorce papers 14 months ago without looking up from the table, planted her hand flat on my chest and said, "Don't go." I had been buying batteries, AA. For a remote control I didn't need, because I lived alone in a 1-bedroom apartment and the only thing I watched was whatever was already playing when I sat down. The batteries were an excuse to leave the house, the same way grocery runs had become an excuse, and coffee shops, and driving to the hardware store to stare at things I didn't need. You do that after a divorce. You manufacture reasons to be in motion, because stillness is where the silence gets loud. I wasn't supposed to be in the electronics aisle. I was supposed to be in Philadelphia with my sister and her kids. But my sister's youngest had come down with something the day before, and she'd called to cancel with genuine sorrow in her voice, and I had said don't worry about it in a tone so flat that she paused and said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Of course," and then spent the next 6 hours doing absolutely nothing in an apartment that still didn't feel like mine, 14 months in. So I was in Hartfield's, in the electronics aisle, holding a pack of batteries I didn't need. And then she was there. Her name is Claire. Claire Renata Doherty, née Alvarez, though she went back to Alvarez the week the divorce was finalized, not spitefully. She told our mediator, just practically, because Doherty had never felt like hers. Fair, there were a lot of things about our marriage that hadn't felt like hers by the end. The apartment we'd chosen because I was closer to my office, the friends we saw because they were my friends first, the holidays we spent with my family, my sister's kids, my father's annual toast that went on too long while Claire smiled in the particular way she had, a smile that reached her eyes only halfway, a smile I had spent 6 years noticing and doing nothing about. I had loved her badly. I want to say that plainly before anything else. I had loved her, I know I had. Because even standing there in the electronics aisle with tinsel dropping from the ceiling display and a child 2 rows over screaming about something, seeing her for the first time in 14 months hit me in a place that hadn't registered a signal since she left. But loving someone and loving them well are not the same thing, and I had not loved her well. And the divorce was not some mysterious collapse. It was an accounting. It was the bill coming due. I just hadn't expected to see her in the electronics aisle at Hartfield's. "Marcus," she said. She was holding a red scarf, not wearing it, holding it. Loosely, the way you hold something when you've grabbed it off a rack and are still deciding. Her hair was different, shorter, maybe an inch. She looked exactly like herself, which sounds obvious but means something specific when you've spent 14 months trying to replace the precise image of someone's face with a blur, and you discover the blur never really took. "Claire," I said. We stood there. The choir finished their song about angels and moved immediately into something about snowflakes. "You're alone?" she said. "Philadelphia fell through," I said. "Ellen's youngest." "Oh," she nodded. "I'm sorry. You?" "I was supposed to be at my mother's," she said. "Her flight got canceled." "Denver, they're saying tomorrow, maybe, so you came to Hartfield's." "So I came to Hartfield," she almost smiled. "The scarf is for me. Is that sad?" "I'm buying batteries," I said, "for a remote control that works fine." She did smile then. All the way. And something in the specific geography of my chest shifted in a way I recognized, and had told myself I was done recognizing. "Well," she said. "Merry Christmas, Marcus." She started to move, turning toward the accessories department, and that was the moment I should have let her go. That, was the clean ending. Two people who had been kind enough to each other on the way out, who had signed the papers without screaming, who had divided the furniture with the aid of colored stickers, and two very patient mediators. Two people who had earned a clean ending. I had the batteries. She had the scarf. The choir was singing. I said, "Do you want to get coffee?" She said yes. That surprised me more than seeing her had. We went to the cafe on the 3rd floor. Hartfield's has a cafe on the 3rd floor, which feels implausible but is real. A small room with dark wood tables and a view of the street, and a holiday menu that listed things like peppermint mocha reverie and spiced cranberry whisper in a font that suggested the naming had taken considerably longer than the drinks warranted. We both ordered plain coffee. We had always ordered plain coffee. 14 months, and that much hadn't changed. We sat. I expected it to be awful. I had run the scenario. Everyone runs the scenario. The first unexpected encounter with the ex, the stilted politeness, the mutual performance of being fine, the mercifully short duration. What I had not prepared for was the possibility that it would be easy. Not comfortable, exactly, but easy, in the way of a language you grew up speaking that you haven't used in years. Your mouth still knows the shapes even when your brain has to search for the words. "How's the firm?" she asked. "Still there," I said. "I made senior associate in September." "Marcus," she looked genuinely pleased. That's really good." "Congratulations, thank you." I meant it. I meant her meaning it. "How's the clinic?" She worked at a family health clinic in the Riverside neighborhood, which she had been doing before we met and would have kept doing, I realized, somewhere around year 5 of our marriage, regardless of what happened to us. The clinic was not a job she had. It was something she was. "We got the federal grant," she said. "In October, we can expand the pediatric wing." "Claire, that's incredible. It really is." She looked down at her coffee for a moment. "It means I don't have to write another grant proposal for 2 years, which I cannot explain how that feels." "Like batteries you don't need to buy," I said. She looked up. Exactly like that. The choir had been piped in through the CAF speakers at a tasteful volume. Outside, the street was beginning to take on snow, not heavily, just that particular tentative dusting that arrives on cue on December 24th, like it's contractually obligated. Claire was watching it through the glass with an expression I had crossed 6 years of December 24ths and had never once asked her what it meant. I asked her now. "What are you thinking about?" She looked back at me slowly. A pause. The measured kind, not uncertainty about the answer, but uncertainty about whether to give it. "The Christmas Eve we spent in the emergency room," she said. I remembered. Year 2 of our marriage. I had sliced my hand open trying to fix a window frame, badly, because I am not a person who should attempt home repairs. And we had spent 5 hours in the ER while a doctor with the specific patience of someone who had seen this exact injury 100 times stitched me up, and Claire sat in the chair next to the bed and read aloud to me from a dog-eared magazine she'd found in the waiting room. Articles about gardening. A recipe for something with butternut squash. A celebrity profile she kept editorializing about in ways that made me laugh so hard the doctor had to ask me to hold still. "I think about that night a lot," I said. "Do you?" She wasn't challenging me. She was genuinely asking. "I think about how you stayed," I said, "in the chair. For 5 hours, reading about butternut squash." "The article was very thorough," she said. "Claire," I set down my coffee. "I think about a lot of things, and this is where I should tell you it went smoothly from there. That we talked it all out over plain coffee in the Hartfield's 3rd floor cafe, while snow dusted the window and piped-in carols played at tasteful volume, and that by the time we ordered a second cup, we had arrived at something easy and mutual and complete. But that is not what happened. What happened is that my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen out of reflex. Old habit. It was a text from a number I didn't have saved, but the name in the preview was enough to land like a fist. Derek Calloway. Not from Derek Calloway, just his name, which was all I needed. Derek Calloway was a partner at Harman & Voss, the firm that had been quietly circling mine for 4 months with the language of a friendly acquisition and the behavior of a hostile one. I knew this because our managing partner had told me, in October, that Calloway was specifically interested in the Meridian portfolio, the client relationships I had spent 3 years building, and that if Harman & Voss completed the acquisition, those relationships would be absorbed and I would very likely not be. The text said, "Happy holidays. I think we should talk before the new year. I have a proposal." On Christmas Eve, at 9 o'clock at night, I put the phone face down on the table. "Everything okay?" Claire said. "Yes," I said. And then, "No. Actually, maybe," she waited. This was something she had always done well, the waiting. I had spent years interpreting it as patience when what it really was, I understood now, was respect. She was not filling silence to make herself more comfortable. She was leaving space for the other person to use. "There's a man named Derek Calloway," I said. "He's trying to take my clients." I explained it briefly, without the full archaeology of the last 4 months, but enough. The acquisition. The Meridian portfolio. The implication that if Harman & Voss moved forward, 3 years of client relationships built on specific trust in me as an individual, not as a representative of a firm, would be handed to someone else with a handshake I had no power to stop. Claire listened to all of it. "Can they do that?" she said. "Legally, your clients have individual contracts with the firm, not with you personally?" "Technically," I said. "But 3 of the Meridian clients have informal letters of intent. I had the foresight to do that in year 1, when I first started to suspect the firm's ownership structure was unstable. They're not binding in the way a hard contract is, but they're documented preference. Calloway knows they exist, which is probably why he's texting on Christmas Eve. He's trying to move before January." She nodded slowly. "And you haven't talked to your clients directly?" "I didn't want to alarm them. Marcus," she said it gently, "you need to call them. Tomorrow is Christmas." Not yet it isn't. She was right. It was 9:15. 3 clients. The letters of intent. A phone call tonight, careful. Not panicked, just checking in, making clear that whatever happened at the firm level, my commitment to them was personal and prior to any acquisition, could be the difference between losing the portfolio and keeping it. "I have to step outside," I said. "Go," she said. I went. The calls took 40 minutes. I stood outside Hartfield's in the dusting snow in my coat that was not quite warm enough for standing still, and I called 3 people on Christmas Eve, and all 3 of them answered, which told me more about the relationships than any letter of intent could. The first conversation was 15 minutes, detailed, practical, reassuring in both directions. The second was 12 minutes. The third was 11, and ended with the client saying, "I appreciate you calling. I mean that. Good luck with everything." By the time I went back inside, I had 3 verbal confirmations that if I chose to leave the firm before any acquisition completed, they would follow me. Which meant I had leverage I hadn't known I had 20 minutes ago, and I had 40 minutes of cold air in my lungs, and Claire was still at the table. She had ordered a 3rd cup of coffee and slid it toward me when I sat down. "Well," she said. "They'll stay with me," I said. "All 3. "Of course they will," she said, as simply as if I'd told her the snow was still falling. "You built those relationships." I looked at her. "You always did that," I said. "What?" Said the thing I needed to hear, and the voice of someone stating an obvious fact. She looked down at her coffee. I don't know about always. I didn't know how much I needed it, I said. Until I didn't have it. The cafe was quieter now. The hour was late enough that most of the store's holiday shoppers had collected their red scarves and their batteries and gone home to wherever home was. The choir had finished playing. Outside, the snow had made up its mind and was coming down properly, real snow now, the kind that means something. Marcus, Claire said. I know, I said. I know this is. I know we don't get to just be in a coffee shop and have it mean something simple. No, she said. We don't. But I need to say something, and I need you to hear it as just true, not as me trying to get something. She nodded. Once, the careful, measured kind. I know what I did wrong, I said. Not in the abstract. Specifically, I made every choice with myself at the center and you at the margin, and I told myself that was love because I was also there, also present, also showing up in the minimum ways. But you needed someone who made choices with you at the center sometimes, and I knew that. I knew it and I didn't change it, and the divorce was not a mystery. It was the right ending to the wrong story. She was quiet for a long moment. It wasn't all you, she said at last. Claire, it wasn't, she said. I let it become about my silence instead of my voice. Every time I should have said something, I chose the smile instead, the one that didn't reach my eyes. You saw it. I know you saw it. And I kept doing it because asking for what you need is terrifying, actually, when you're not sure you'll get it. So she set her coffee cup down with a small, careful click. It was both of us. It was both of us doing the wrong version of love. We sat with that for a moment. Why don't you have anywhere to be tonight? I said. Actually, you have people. You have your colleagues, the clinic staff. You have friends. I do, she said. And you chose Hartfields. She looked at me. Not past me, not toward the window. Directly at me, with the expression I had spent 6 years failing to read and was only now beginning to understand was not patience or composure, but courage. The specific courage it takes to mean something and hold still while the other person decides what to do with it. I've been to Hartfields 3 times this week, she said. I took a breath. Claire, don't make it mean too much, she said quickly. I'm not asking you for anything, Marcus. I just needed to be somewhere that felt familiar. And this is where we used to come. Before the clinic, before senior associate, when everything was still hypothetical. I remember, I said. You bought that terrible hat, the sequined one. She laughed, actually laughed, and the sound of it moved through me in a way I had forgotten sounds could. I still have it. You're wearing it at midnight, I said. Absolutely not. It's Christmas Eve. Marcus, Claire, I looked at her. I don't know what this is. I'm not asking you to know what it is either. But I'm alone in a city on Christmas Eve, and you're alone in a city on Christmas Eve. And we are 2 people who built something real once, even if we built it badly. And I would very much like to not walk out of this cafe and go back to separate silences tonight. So, I picked up my coffee. Tell me what the sequined hat situation currently is. And then, we can figure out the rest. She looked at me for a long moment, and then she said, don't go. 2 words. The same 2 words she'd said in the electronics aisle, half a floor away, and a lifetime ago tonight. Except this time they weren't quick or reflexive. This time they were deliberate. This time she was holding still and meaning them. I said I won't. I want to tell you we had all the answers by midnight. We didn't. We sat in the Hartfields cafe until the store closed, and a teenager in a red vest politely told us he was going to need to start stacking chairs. And then we walked out into the real snow and stood on the sidewalk, with our coats pulled close, and Claire was wearing the red scarf she'd gone back and paid for at the accessories counter while I was making calls. And neither of us said what happened next, because neither of us knew. What I knew was this: Derek Calloway texted back at midnight, "Happy holidays. Looking forward to talking in the new year." And I did not feel afraid of that text anymore. I had leverage. I had 3 clients who'd answered on Christmas Eve. I had options I'd spent 4 months pretending I didn't have, because options require decisions. And decisions require knowing what you want, and for 14 months I had successfully avoided the question of what I wanted, because the apartment with the silence was easier than the question. And I knew this. Claire Alvarez had come to Hartfield's 3 times that week. Not looking for me. I want to be clear about that, and I think it's important to be clear about it. Because love that has earned its way back earns it slowly and without grand gestures. She hadn't come looking for me. She'd come looking for something familiar in a city that had started to feel too much like hers alone, which is its own kind of loneliness, the loneliness of a life that fits but fits around a shape that's missing. And I had walked into the electronics aisle with a pack of batteries I didn't need. That's how it happens, when it happens, not in a plan. In a Tuesday, in a Christmas Eve, in 2 words said twice, once out of reflex and once out of will, by a woman in a red scarf standing in the snow who had decided, finally, to use her voice instead of her smile. We didn't have the answers. We had each other's phone numbers, which we'd never actually deleted, and a coffee shop table we'd sat at for 3 hours, and the understanding that the conversation we needed to have was a long one, longer than one night, longer than a holiday, and that it would require us to be the people we hadn't been yet, not the people we had been before. But I walked to my car that night and did not feel alone, and for the first time in 14 months, when the silence came, it was quiet in the good way. The way before a sentence, not the way after one. Have you ever stood in the middle of an ordinary errand and realized that the thing you'd been avoiding for months was standing right there in the next aisle? Not a person, maybe, but a feeling, a question, a version of your life you'd told yourself you were done wanting? I want to know if you've been back to a place, 3 times in a week, looking for something you couldn't name. Tell me what you found, or what found you. And subscribe, because next week's story starts in the parking lot of a hospital at 2 in the morning, and someone's about to say something they can't take back.